Human trafficking, an industry that's been built upon the foundation of slavery that began way back in the 1200s, and which became a common form of everyday life at that time. It mainly spiked in the 1400s, beginning with the European slave trading in Africa, and followed by the Portuguese transporting people from Africa to Portugal, using them as slaves. The British, the Spaniards, those from Holland, France, Sweden, and Denmark, and so on, began to join in on the trade that then grew in the 1700s as something that was needed to fulfill sexual purposes. At the time, it was then recognized legally as white slavery, which was the act of obtaining a white woman or girl by the use of force, drugs, or simple dishonesty for sex, which was unwanted by the one that was being trafficked. Later on, it then spread to the men and young boys. They were then forced to do labor for little or no pay at all. The definition of human trafficking states that it is a modern day form of slavery which does not discriminate on ethnicity, gender, or age. And it is said to be modern day because although they're not literally held in chains as the slaves of the triangular trade did, they are being held in chains that are in the forms of high heels, in clothing, in being locked in rooms with no windows, not being able to have any source to the outside world. They're being held in captive in extreme conditions of work, whether it be in the sex trafficking industry, in the forced labor, bonded labor, involuntary domestic servitude, and even child soldiers are considered to be slaves in the human trafficking industry. A pimp is the man or the woman that controls and financially benefits from this commercial sexual exploitation of another person. The relationship between a pimp and the girl or the boy that they recruit is very, very abusive and possessive. And he or she uses techniques such as psychological intimidation, manipulation, starvation, rape, gang rape, beating, all these things in order to exploit this person under more control than they already have. In brothels, those are mainly inhabited by Asian victims and Asian pimps. They have a mama-san, and that is almost always a woman that manages the brothel whenever the pimp is away. She's the top dog, and the victims and those that are being enslaved have to go to her. And the people that fuel this industry more and more each and every year are called Johns. Johns are those that are contributing to human trafficking, whether it be through sex trafficking or labor trafficking. They're the ones that increase the demand, and they're the ones that just fall slave into continuing to want to have their needs to be supplied by these men and these women that are in human trafficking. Now, since human trafficking has grown, unfortunately, it can be anywhere. It can be in brothels, cantinas, which are in the form of bars, and they are always places that are open in very unusual hours. They can also be in massage parlors, nail salons. You can find those that are in human trafficking. You can find them on the street working. They can be even purchased online through websites like Craigslist, and they're just being exposed and they're being thrown out there as such as products to these Johns because of how much society has evolved. It has opened more avenues for them to be available and to them to be shown to the Johns by the pimps. And these are just ways that human trafficking has grown in now, especially in 2019. There is an estimated 24.9 million men, women, children that are living in these scenarios. Out of that, the UT Austin School of Social Work reported in 2016 that 313,000 victims were in Texas alone. 79,000 of those began as minors in the sex trafficking industry, and 234,000 were in the labor trafficking industry. Unfortunately, these numbers have grown throughout the years, making human trafficking the second most profitable criminal activity in the United States alone, right after drug trafficking. And now to hit home. According to the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, Houston is #1 among cities, and Texas as a whole ranks #2 among all 50 states in terms of human trafficking rates, right after California. And because of these numbers that have unfortunately kept growing throughout the years, it's been the mission for organizations such as Redeemed Ministries, Elijah Rising, Love People Not Pixels, and now in 2019, A21, to dedicating themselves to abolish slavery in Houston forever. And now this amazing event, Walk for Freedom, its reasoning is a global response to human trafficking, an outward expression of our inward desire to see slavery abolished everywhere, forever. It's an awareness and a fundraising event that rallies tens of thousands of abolitionists, taking millions of steps in hundreds of cities all over the world. It's local and it's global, and that's the way that these organizations and many people that are fighting against this horrible industry have seen that has most effect. Because at the end of the day, human trafficking isn't something that is occurring in foreign countries outside of our reach. It is occurring here in our city. It is occurring in Humble, Atascocita, Spring, Cypress, in Fifth Ward, and every single place that you can imagine that inhabits Houston. That's where human trafficking is being held. And it needs to be stopped now because it cannot keep growing, and it won't. It's our way of telling the world that slavery still exists and that it will never be okay for this to keep on growing. And I adore all these organizations and this walk for just being so bold and speaking up towards these things and letting it be known to traffickers and to Johns and to pimps that we will no longer tolerate this injustice towards our own people, our own neighbors, our own fellow students, our own co-workers to be mistreated this way. And it will end now, as soon as possible. I know that all this information may sound overwhelming and evil and just so horrible to even speak about. We have to realize that those of us that are fortunate enough to not be victims of this industry, that we need to think about our brothers and sisters being in these terrible conditions and having to live this life that they're not meant to live. We need to be their voice. We need to be their advocates. We need to make it known that there are people that we know and love are being held captive, and we all have the tools to break them free.